You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Coming from Florida, college football is about as popular as sunshine and low taxes, right? At the risk of alienating you a little bit, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to start out with an FSU story.
But you recognize that Florida is the free state. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So when I was in the state senate, FSU was heading towards a college championship, and a shocking story had happened. Jameis Winston, who was on his way to become a Heisman Trophy winner and lead his team to the championship, was accused and arrested of a small theft. And people thought, how could this possibly be happening? When you look further into it, you see this huge gap that happened back in the day between some of these star athletes versus the schools and the boosters and even a lot of the students. And that is one thing that name, image, likeness has helped balance out a little bit. We don't see some of these student athletes living in poverty while they're helping entertain millions of people. Of course, that is not uniform throughout, and we know that. I'm proud to represent Central Florida. Go Knights, Space U. We're going to work on the football program a little more, Mr. Chairman, much like with UF. We're all working on that stuff. But we see big programs getting bigger right now and smaller programs struggling, and that is a concern. More popular sports like football, men's and women's basketball are surging in national popularity and in resources. But other lesser-known sports are suffering, and we need to recognize that. We're also home to EA Sports, which every college football player in the nation signed up and got a compensation for being able to lend their likeness. So that's something that we're really proud of in our area. But as was mentioned, we need rules of the road. We've had many hearings, but no bill passed into law just yet. And so we have work to do. Financial literacy, making sure that our student athletes have representation, safeguarding all NCAA sports, and potentially an independent players association. Mr. Falconelli, where do you think we need to go next on it? Is it a player vote? Is it an NCAA vote? Do we need a law on this? Where do you hope to go with this next?
Yeah, the future we see for college athletics and for college football is a world in which we're not reliant upon a court ruling or legislation to really set what is going to happen next, but a world in which the athletes themselves are empowered to negotiate to shape their own futures. We firmly believe that can be done through collective bargaining, and whether they are employees or not, we believe it is collective bargaining what matters. If athletes were made employees tomorrow, they would still face many of the same issues they are facing now and many more. And it's until they are organized and represented by independent players associations will they be able to actually enact the health and safety regulations they need or engage in the further revenue sharing and getting good deals on revenue sharing. I'd like to point out the EA deal for the NCAA video game is one of the only group licensing deals in sports to ever be signed where the athletes had no revenue share on the royalties from it, and were just given a $600 fee for one time for their appearance in the game, or every year they re-up, but their name, image, and likeness is already guaranteed to continue to be used whether they re-up or not for the rest of their eligibility. And that game has gone on to probably cross over $700 million in revenue this year. It was the top-selling sports video game of all time, and athletes have not been able to share in any of that revenue share.
Well, we certainly believe in collective bargaining. I also want to turn to NIH briefly. We've been talking about NIL, the National Institute of Health. Student health is paramount. We've seen in Florida, the chairman's own university created Gatorade because it's super hot to practice in Florida. We actually make Gatorade in the district, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure you're happy about that. But we've seen student athletes pass away after conditioning, including, unfortunately, at our home university at UCF back in 2008. A lot of progress has been made since then, both there and in many other areas. And one of the NIH grants that UCF has is looking at digestive and kidney research. One of the biggest issues we see is dehydration. And then even if it doesn't happen at the time of a student athlete, that dehydration can affect them going forward as they get older. Mr. Falconelli, how important is it for us to continue to look at hydration for student athletes and have these NIH grants that are so important?
Oh, it's absolutely important. As Ms. Cole testified to today, there can be traumatic effects with stuff that surrounds that. And as a former football player, hydration, brain damage, thousands of subconcussive blows every day or every year for 5 years straight. The research being done into health and safety and the issues that we're still trying to understand, like CTE, is incredibly important. And these are the things that we as athletes are going to carry forward for the rest of our lives. So whether or not we have the time to enroll in a STEM major and help be part of doing this research, we're going to be feeling the impacts of its loss for a long time. As many of us can attest to who are former athletes, after your career is done, your injuries are still there. You still wake up with pains, your knees, your back, your joints, your shoulders. That stays with you for life. So continuing to do important medical research is something that impacts all athletes.
And we'll be fighting this Trump administration freeze and unlawful restrictions to make sure we can continue to prioritize athlete health, and I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaking of Gatorade,